Our scripture reading today comes from Isaiah 58. I'm just going to read it off the computer. Do you want me to share the screen so you can read along? I see some nodding heads. Let's do it. Move my boxes. Okay, Isaiah 58. Shout out. Do not hold back. Lift up your voice like a trumpet. Announce to my people their rebellion, to the house of Jacob their sins. Yet day after day they seek me and delight to know my ways, as if they were a nation that practiced righteousness and did not forsake the ordinance of their God. They ask of me righteous judgments. They delight to draw near to God. Why do we fast, but you do not see? Humble ourselves, but you do not notice. Look, you serve your own interest on your fast day and oppress all your workers. Look, you fast only to quarrel and to fight and to strike with a wicked fist. Such fasting as you do today will not make your voice heard on high. Is such the fast that I choose, a day to humble oneself? Is it to bow down the head like a bulrush and to lie in sackcloth and ashes? Will you call this a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this the fast that I choose, to loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover them and not to hide yourself from your own kin? Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up quickly. Your vindicator shall go before you. The glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry for help, and God will say, here I am. If you remove the yoke from among you, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness, and your gloom be like noonday. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your needs in parched places and make your bones strong. You shall be like a watered garden, like a spring of water whose waters never fail. Your ancient ruins will be rebuilt. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called repairer of the breach, the restorer of streets to live in. If you refrain from trampling the Sabbath, from pursuing your own interests on my holy day, if you call the Sabbath a delight and the holy day of the Lord honorable, if you honor it, not going your own ways, serving your own interests or pursuing your own affairs, then you shall take delight in the Lord, and I will make you ride upon the heights of the earth. I will feed you with the heritage of your ancestor Jacob, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. Friends, this is the word of God. Doesn't that watered garden metaphor like really hit? Right. I thought of you, Phil. I was reading that. Yeah, it makes a big difference. Well, so here we are in the last Sunday of our Sabbath series. Over the summer, we have thought a lot about the Sabbath, right? A lot about how God commands us to take this day to rest, just as God rested on the seventh day in the creation story. And it's hard for us to do. And as we've explored over the past 2 Sundays in particular, there are many ways that our work habits and our spending habits are caught up in America's individualist, consumerist values in a way that sometimes puts us at odds with God's values. Even when we manage to get to rest and delight, sometimes we don't quite get the point. So I wanted to show you a video to kind of explain what I mean. This is from the TV show Parks and Recreation, which maybe you have watched. It's about the employees of a small town's Parks and Rec office. And in this particular clip, 2 of the town employees, Tom and Donna, express, I just think really perfectly, the way that we can kind of get the idea of rest and self-care a little bit wrong. So Melanie, go ahead and play that.
DJ Blunts is in the building. Here to announce that Tom Haverford is in the building.
Oh, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Donatella.
T-Mobile.
3 words for you. Treat yourself.
Treat yourself 2011.
Once a year, Donna and I spend a day treating ourselves. What do we treat ourselves to?
Clothes.
Treat yourself.
Fragrances.
Treat yourself.
Massages.
Treat yourself.
Mimosas.
Treat yourself.
Fine leather goods.
Treat yourself.
It's the best day of the year.
The best day of the year.
I got a question. What do you think about inviting Ben to come along with us today?
Why no? This is our thing.
He really seems like he could use a day off. He's like a skinny little rubber band that's about to snap in half.
Exactly. He doesn't know how to relax. Donna, you and I are relaxation professionals. There's no way Ben can slow down enough to keep up with us. Manuvian princess, this is our holy day. It's a 1 day a year I allow myself to be selfish.
Ooh, cupcakes.
Those are all for me, Jerry.
Hopefully a little bit of a chuckle there. So in the clip, right, Tom and Donna are talking about their tradition, treat yourself. And what's interesting is the way that I think it illustrates the idea so many of us get when we hear the phrase self-care, right? Visions of massages and shopping sprees and treating ourselves to all the things that we usually have the discipline to avoid. For Tom and Donna, this is a day about relaxation, right? We are relaxation professionals. And at first glance, it seems like a day of rest and delight. Remember what they said about their coworker, Ben, right? He really could use a day off, Donna says. He's like a skinny little rubber band about to snap. And Tom says, exactly, he does not know how to relax like we do. Ben does not understand how to treat himself. Here's the thing though, for those of us wound up like rubber bands about to snap, the real relaxation, the real self-care is not about buying things, about taking vacation time and spending money to pamper ourselves. The real self-care we need is to do the things that will build a life we don't have to escape from, to build a life that will not wind us up like a rubber band about to snap. Instead of running ourselves continually into the ground only to yell self-care as an excuse to like tag out of our responsibilities for a day or an afternoon, what's really caring for ourselves is doing what has to be done so that we never get to that headspace in the first place. Things like Lisa's favorite, making and following a budget, right? Or something that Chris is passionate about, caring for our bodies, finding all of the balance in our food and our movement, right? We have to care for our minds and our emotions. We have to do those kind of adulting tasks that make things so much easier if they are simply faced and done, and make things so much harder if they are put off and avoided. True self-care is doing what you need to create a life that you don't have to escape from. In a similar way, true Sabbath rest and delight is not merely about doing what I, as an individual, find pleasurable, but must include the things that build a world where rest and delight are more possible for more people. And I think that's what God is trying to tell us in Isaiah 58. That passage, if you remember, begins with kind of like a whiplash moment. God says, shout out, don't hold back, tell my people about their rebellion, and then quickly changes to day after day they seek me and delight to know my ways. God's people seeking God, delighting to know God's ways, and being reprimanded as rebels. It doesn't make sense. But as we keep reading, right, things become clear. Day after day, they seek me and delight to know my ways, God says, as if they were a nation that practiced righteousness and did not forsake the ordinance of their God. Somewhere, there has been a breakdown in communication. God acknowledges that the people are seeking God, delighting to know God's ways, but when the rubber meets the road, God finds their efforts a little bit empty. Somehow the people think they are practicing righteousness when really they have forsaken God's commands. And the people, for their part, are confused. Why do we fast, but you do not see? Why humble ourselves, but you do not notice? Well, it turns out they've gotten a few things wrong. They may be observing the Sabbath and doing the things that make them seem humble from the outside, but they've missed a crucial piece of the puzzle. God has this list of reasons why their fasting doesn't really mean that much. They oppress all their workers, they blame each other, lie and fight with one another, all while pretending to be, so humble, so spiritual, practicing the traditions that are supposed to show their commitment to God. In our context, we might say they're going to church on Sunday for an hour and then living as if nothing that happened in that hour mattered for the rest of their lives. Throughout the book of Isaiah, there's a lot of concern with what's gone wrong and how it's gone wrong and why it's gone wrong. And this chapter isn't any different. God is attempting to help the people understand their mistakes through the words of Isaiah, a prophet, who contrasts their current practices with the kind of worship God really wants. Right? He says, is not this the fast that I choose, to loose the bonds of injustice and undo the thongs of the yoke and let the oppressed go free? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house when you see the naked, to cover them and not hide yourself from your own kin? There's even part of this passage where God talks about Sabbath in particular, and I hope your ears kind of perked up when we heard it. Isaiah says the people have been trampling the Sabbath, pursuing their own affairs, the things he mentioned earlier on. They're exploiting people's labor in order to serve their own interests, and they're fighting with one another instead of calling Sabbath a delight. What we might infer from this passage is that it's possible that people didn't know the Sabbath as a delight because they had forgotten God's Sabbath values to go with it. It's not just a day for treating yourself, but a day for rest from earning and consuming, resting from the distractions that allow us to ignore one another or to simply see one another as commodities or object lessons to prove our points. They had forgotten God's good values for good work, as opposed to Pharaoh's values, and were promoting oppression and exhaustion and a push to produce more with less, forgetting that good work requires freedom and willing hearts and reasonable limits. This passage lands a little differently for me than it has before in this moment when Christian nationalism is openly on the rise. There are many powerful people in this country who want to display their faith, who want to worship for show while really valuing hubris over humility, and who are just full, right, of ideas about who to blame. In our current setting, even this passage from Isaiah feels political, potentially polarizing in the way that it privileges the oppressed, hungry, poor, and naked. These are realities we don't want to think about, we don't want to engage with. They're work for someone else to do, even if we're willing to admit that they're there to begin with. We're more likely really to blame the poor or hungry or oppressed for their situation than we are to see the communal responsibility to one another that God commands here. If we're honest, God would probably chew us out too, just like the Israelites. Much like we feel pretty often these days, Isaiah's people had been crying out to God to save them, to do something about the mess that consumed their world. And it's not that God didn't or couldn't hear them, that God can't hear us, or even that God didn't or doesn't care. It's that God had already given the people, given us, the tools needed to change things. If you remove the yoke from among you, Isaiah says, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness and your gloom be like noonday. You shall be like a watered garden, like a spring of water whose waters never fail. Your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. You shall rise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called repairer of the breach, restorer of streets to live in. And this is the kind of Sabbath rest and delight we are called to, that builds a world less like hell on earth for more of God's beloved creation. Professor Dennis Olson calls Sabbath one of the most strongly countercultural concepts in the Bible in relation to our modern society and its values. He says, our secular world tends to worship money, power, success, and fame. Our self-indulgent and individualistic culture asks, what's in it for me, not what would be just and good for my neighbor or the community as a whole. And maybe, to return to that question from 3 weeks ago, maybe it's this countercultural nature of the Sabbath that makes us want to resist it. To do what would be just and good for my neighbors and community as a whole might require something of me I don't really want to give. The kind of Sabbath that is most palatable to us, that treat yourself kind of relaxation, is maybe more what God might call trampling the Sabbath. Instead, God invites us to honor the Sabbath as a delight, an opportunity to step out of our culture's norms and rest in the flourishing God so desires for all people and the earth. So in this way, we are going to continue our Sabbath practice this fall. As you know, this year we've received a grant from Leadership Education at Duke Divinity School to build the leadership skills in our youth and to help our congregation connect to mission in our region. Once a month throughout this fall, you're going to hear from somebody whose everyday work is the kind of Sabbath work Isaiah describes, loosening the bonds of injustice. These will be people from a variety of backgrounds who work on important issues that our youth have selected. We're going to be hearing about anti-racism work, reproductive justice work, work related to climate change. Just a few tiny issues, easily solved. Through their visits with our church, we're hoping to grow in our awareness of how God is calling us to build a Sabbath world of rest and delight for more people, to grow in our awareness and our skills as we will be led by the youth in a service project next spring. So as we finish up our summer sermon series on Sabbath, say that 5 times fast, there are 2 questions in the online bulletin to continue thinking about as we move into our fall programming. Where have you heard cries for injustice in the news lately? How does your faith inform your participation in such causes? And also, what sins might Isaiah add to his list if he were alive today? What forms of injustice do we tolerate or perpetuate? Some interesting questions, right? And I look forward to exploring these more with you all and with our youth at the helm this fall.